Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 10 of my Java video tutorial series. In this part of the video tutorial series, I'm going to continue making my monster game. Now just understand, I'm doing this totally out of my head for the most part. Don't know how this is going to turn out. This is all basically trying to teach you about logic. Whenever I don't say I'm making a video game tutorial, you can understand that it's going to be very easy to understand. Whenever I bring that up, understand it's going to be logic based and you might not quite get it. But that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't watch it, because over time you're going to completely get it and you're going to have a real verbose understanding of how to program. So here I am. I just went and copied the code from lesson 8 over into a little program called lesson10.java. And what I'm going to do in this tutorial is I'm going to try to make these monsters move around without either landing on each other and at the same time not falling off the board. Sounds really simple, but there's a lot of things you have to think about. And if you didn't watch the previous array tutorial, you should definitely check that out, and I have a link to it above. Alright, so what I'm going to need to do, I have a bunch of monsters on the board, and this is from the previous tutorial, as you see right here. These are the monsters with the letters that you have here. And what I need to do is make them move around without falling off the board, or landing on top of each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an enhanced for statement, which I talked about before, and it's going to cycle through all of my monsters. I'm still using the old monster2.java file, so I'm going to just put in the object name just like before, so monster2 is what I'm using, and then M, which is going to be like a container for the monsters as they get spit out of the array, and then monsters is the array name itself. So I'm just going to come in here and do all this and give myself space. I don't know if anybody's ever really tried to make a video game out of their head in a video tutorial, but that's what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to go if one of the things I need to do is check that the monster's alive. And I created this little method before called getAlive. It's going to tell me if the monster's alive or not. And then inside here, what I need to do, I'm going to use that array utilities index of file. And you can see up here, this is this guy right here. I imported this library, and I talked about how I did that before. And basically, I'm going to use that to get the index of the current monster. So I'm going to create a new integer, and I'm going to call it array item index is equal to, and then if I want to use one of those cool things, and to use the array utilities you need to actually embed that library, and there's a link that explains how to embed Java libraries underneath this video. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just say monsters, which is the name of the array, and then M, which is going to be the current monster that I'm playing with here. And then what I'm going to do is take that current monster and I'm going to call the move monster method for it. And what I'm going to pass to this method that doesn't even exist yet is monsters, which is the whole entire array, and I'm also going to pass array item index, which is going to be the current monster that I'm planning on moving, so that I'll be able to find it inside of there. And then basically what I'm going to do after that is call redraw board, and let's just hope that the monster survived all that, and we're going to be able to do it. So, and that's all the changes I'm making, or the only changes that I plan on making to this part of the code. All the rest of the code is going to be in my monster class, and that's where I'm going to go next. We're going to continue creating the function here, move monster. So this is a new guy that I introduced, so I have to actually create move monster now. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go public move monster. I'm not going to return anything, so I'm public. It's going to be public for anything to use. However, it's going to be void, meaning it's not going to return anything. And then what did we say we were going to pass to move monster? Well, we're going to pass over the monsters array and the array index. Inside of this guy, I have to go monster to array, and I'm going to just call it monster because it is a monster, an individual monster, and then int, and I'm just going to make this called array item index just like it did before. And then this is the whole big guy that I'm going to be creating here, and I'm going to walk you through the process of what I'm thinking. Okay, so I have this monster. Well, one of the things I'm going to need to know is the space open that this monster plans to move into? So one of the things that tells me is I need a boolean, and it's going to be called is space open. And currently I'm just going to guess that that answer is true in the beginning, and later on I'm going to either prove or disprove that. Another thing I'm going to want to do is I want to define the maximum of y and x for our battle board, so that I have that on hand. And after I create all this code, logic, or whatever you want to call it, I'm going to probably go back in here and fix some of the, not logic errors, but just errors in regards to it's not been optimized. So just understand that this is logic that's out of my head that might not be optimized. But it gives you sort of a window into the way that I solve logic problems, which I think is very, very hard to understand. Why? Remember, because we're dealing with an array, we have to put the array part in there. Length -1. So I figured out what my maximum size is, and remember the -1's here because we start counting at the index of 0 and go up to 1 less than whatever the maximum size is. So for example, if I have an array that's 10 items wide, it's going to start at 0 and end at 9. So that's the reason why the -1's there. Well, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a big giant while loop. It's going to continue to run while the space is open. That's what it's going to do. And it's just going to be used to make sure I don't move a monster into an occupied space. So what else am I going to need? Well, I'm going to need to know which direction it's going to move and which distance the monster is going to move. So let's just start off with direction. And I'm going to go random move direction. And this is a 2x2 sort of like playing board. So let's just guess and say that this monster is going to move in one of 4 different directions, which it will: north, south, east, west. So I need math random, and I'm going to go, there's 4 different spaces, right, like that, and then I'm going to go int, and I'm going to go rand move distance. Remember, we defined the distance that the monster could potentially move. We gave everybody a maximum number, so we're just going to go math again, random. I'm going to say multiply this times this, which is a reference to the monster that I'm working with, so it's going to get the specific get movement method that we had before, which is just going to return the maximum move distance. That's all get movement actually does. So now I know I'm creating a random direction the monster is going to move, and I'm creating a random move distance based off of the maximum move distance that the monster has. Maybe something else I want to do, because I am developing this, is to say system out and then do a print line, because I know I want to see this. So I'm going to say rand move distance. I'm going to print out to screen this information so that I can check my work to make sure that I'm going in the right direction. So that's all I'm doing there. I'm just printing out that information just to make sure that I can see what's going on as it's being programmed. And anytime you ever have a situation where you're creating a program, it's always good to have things like this, so you can track variable values changing as they change. And if you ever have an error you don't understand, of course, you should also do the same thing, because it's going to help you track down your errors. And then what I want to do is erase the monster's character on the board by replacing it with a star. So I'm going to go battle board, and then I'm going to say this Y position, and then this X position, and I'm just going to set it to star. So that's what that's going to do. It's going to figure out what the current position for this monster is and just set it to a star, because we know we're going to continue searching for a space for the new monster until we find one, so we might as well just get that out of the way right away. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create a bunch of if statements, and what they're going to do is they're going to find the new X position and Y position based off of the current position on the board, as well as what? The random move distance and the random move direction. So that's what that's going to do for me. So I'm going to say if rand move direction is equal to 0, that means north in this situation. What I want to do is make sure that my monster doesn't accidentally fall off the game board. So I'm going to go if this dot Y position, because it's moving north, remember? So it's going to potentially hit a negative number, which I don't want it to do. So I'm going to take the random move distance, right like that, and I'm going to make sure that that random move distance does never go below 0, because I do not want it to fall off the game board. So something else I might want to do then is go, if that is true, if it is a negative number, I want to set the position to equal 0. So that, all that does there is it makes sure the monster doesn't fall off the game board. And then I'm going to go else. If that doesn't happen, well, I know that my position is valid. So I'm just going to say that it's this valid move, so I might as well just allow that valid move to occur. So that's what that's going to do. It's going to make sure it doesn't go too far north and fall off the game board with a negative number. However, if it doesn't come back negative, we're going to make sure that we keep that move distance. Keep everything as it is. Alright, so then what do we got to do? Well, what if the move direction is not north? Well, I got to check for that. So I'm going to go rand move direction if it's equal to 1. That means it's an eastward moving monster. Sure, I keep that where it's supposed to be. And then I'm going to copy this so I don't have to do a whole bunch of typing here. Paste that inside of there. So it's eastward moving. So that means I have to worry about it going beyond the maximum board space. Well, thankfully up here, see, I tracked down the maximum X space and the maximum Y space. So I know that it can't go below 0, and I know it can't go above those numbers. So in this situation, I'm going to go if this, in this situation, it's going east, so this is going to be X instead, plus random move distance is greater than, and I'm going to say max x board space. Then I'm actually going to copy this guy. Then we're going to set the value of this guy to the maximum board space. So just like I wouldn't let it go to a negative number, I also am not going to let it go beyond a positive number. And then I'm going to go make sure that this is set to x, because we're moving eastward, remember? Otherwise, everything should be okay. So what I'm going to do is go x position, and I'm going to set that to this guy right here, so that everything's all peachy and wonderful. And then I can come down here, copy that, and then I can come down to this part, and again do an else if the move direction is 2, which is going to be the same as south. Well, here I'm going to go and do y position again. And then this guy is going to be maximum y board space, because I don't want it to go beyond that maximum point. And then this is going to be changed into a y. This is going to be changed into a y. And then this is going to be changed into a y. And I think you get the logic of what's going on here. So I'm not going to keep repeating myself. And then come down here, and I'm going to close off this guy again, and then paste in an else. But in this situation, we know that it's going to mean it's moving to the west. So I'm going to go else this x position minus random move distance is less than 0. Again, we're protecting it from falling off the left side of the screen now. I'm going to set this x position to 0, this x position, and then I'm going to change this to negative since we're moving to the west. And then I should actually come up here, make sure that I did all this right. And yeah, anytime you have big giant long area like this, you want to do something like end of while loop. That's going to help you keep everything in check a little bit better. And then this is going to be end of move monster. Should have did that before. So now we know when on all those things and how to keep those all straight. Okay, so now we know the move direction, and we also know the move distance, and we know that it's not going to fall off the board, so we're happy about that. So now what we want to do is make sure we don't move monsters on top of other monsters. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a for statement, and I'm going to go int, I'm just going to give it I as a value. I'm going to get the length of my monster array, and then what are we going to do? One thing I don't want it to do is check that it might potentially fall on top of itself. See, what I'm doing here is I'm saying that I want to check to see if where I'm planning on moving my monster, there already is a monster in there. Well, the current X and Y values for the monster I'll be searching for will obviously be equal to this said monster. So I don't want to go in here and actually check it against itself, because this will create a infinite loop, which is just silly. So that's why array index item, that's why we passed the actual value for the monster that we are checking. That's up here. See, here I passed not only the array filled with all the monsters, but the actual index location for the current monster that I'm moving. So let's say I'm planning on moving monster Frank, and his current X position is equal to 1, and his current Y position is equal to 3. Well, that's what this guy is. He's going to have an X and Y value of 1 and 3. So what I need to do is make sure that I do not try to check the monster against itself, because it's always going to come back negative. So that's what I'm doing here. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, leave a comment below. So if I am trying to check the monster against itself, I'm just going to create a if statement, and I'm going to throw continue inside of that. And what continue is going to do is it's going to jump me back to this for loop. It's going to iterate I, and it's going to skip over the monster so that the monster isn't checked against itself. Something else I want to do is I want to check to make sure that, obviously there's no monster in the current space. And I'm thinking I want to do this in a separate method, because this one's getting a little bit busy. So in this next method, I'm going to pass it not only monster, I'm also going to pass it the value of I, which is going to be this right here, current monster that I'm looking for. And then I'm also going to pass it array index item. So what I'm doing is I is going to be checking for the current space that I want to see if it's open, and array index is going to represent the monster that I plan to move to that space if the space is open. However, I'm not exactly sure how I want on my space to work. So I'm actually going to just leave this the way that it is right now. I'm going to put a little thing in here so I can easily figure out where I was. And then I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to start creating this method called on my space. And then I'm going to come back here in a minute and see what's going on. So now what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to make this guy public. I'm going to have him return a Boolean value, because that's the easiest thing I can think of to do. And then this guy is going to be getting what? He's going to be getting a monster2 array, and I'm just going to call it monster. And he's also going to be getting an int that is going to be the index to check to see if there is an open there right now. And it's also going to get another index that's going to be the monster itself. And I'm just going to call that index to check 2. And then I'm going to go end of on my space, so that I know where that method ends. So now what I'm going to do is check to see if the two monsters have the same XY position. And sort of drawing a blank. I know this is going to work, so I'm just going to do this. I'm sure there's an easier way to do this. I'm just going to create a big giant if statement. Index to check 1 X position, and then I'm going to go equal to, and then I'm just going to copy this. Paste that in there, and then just change this to monster to check 2. And then here I'm going to go put 2 AND statements inside of there. And then I'm going to copy this whole thing again. And then I'm going to be checking the Y position and then this Y position. And then all this is going to return, if those two things are equal to each other, I'm going to return true as a value. That means that I'm trying to move a monster into a space that already contains a monster. Else, well, if the above isn't true, the X position and Y position is already equal, well, I know that there is no monster there. That's making me feel good that I decided to move this out of the other method, because it sort of really cleaned everything up there. So that's the end of on my space. So I'm going to jump back up here. Didn't think it would be that easy, but it was, thankfully. Now what I'm going to be able to do is, since on my space in this situation is going to say that the space is open, I'm going to go is space open is equal to true. And what you might be wondering is, why am I doing that? Well, this goes back to the while loop that I created here a little bit ago. See? While is space is open, see? While that is open, meaning true, I'm going to continue checking to see if there's a monster in the space where I want to move the new monster to. So I jumped over to the method called onMySpace and I said, hey, is there a monster there currently? And the answer came back true. That's why we are in this first part here. So that means I want to set is space open to true, so that the while loop will re-go through the whole process of creating a new space to look for my new monster. Throw me out of this for loop, but not out of the while loop, and it's going to take me back to the beginning of the while loop. So that's why I'm using break there. Else, if there is nothing there, I can just come in here real simply and go is space open and set this to false, and understand that whenever I leave this for loop that it's automatically going to jump me out of that guy. So that's like totally cool. So now what do I got to do? Well, I want to set the value inside of my battleboard array to whatever the first character is for my new monster in its current position. So I'm going to go this Y position, this X position. So I'm going to get the current X and Y position, and I'm going to give it a value of this name, CHAR, 1, whatever the first letter is for my monster. And that's the end of move monster. I think I did everything right. I'll save it, find out. And let's execute this guy. And after I execute this, I see that I get an error here that I can't convert an int to a boolean, which is this line 53 right here. Get alive needs to be changed to a boolean value. So let's file save that, see if that fixes my problems. And there it did. It executed, put the monsters on the board. Got ourselves another little goofy error. On line 189 of my monster 2, I just have to close off with another curly brace. And after fixing those couple errors, you can see that everything is working. This is the beginning game board, and then this is the new. And you can see here that the letters did indeed move around, or the monsters did indeed move. There's Frank, there's Drac. Drac looks like he stayed in the same place, but Frank moved. And you can see here, earlier I said that I wanted to print out the move distance as well as the move direction. 3 represents west, 2 represents south, and they're both the same. And Frank was the very first thing to move, so we can check here. Did Frank move to the west, and did he move 1 space? Well, there's Frank there. And you can see that he did indeed move. And if we keep executing this over and over and over again, you can see that all these different pieces continue to move. So hopefully you'll learn something from that. I know these tutorials are a little bit crazy. If you didn't quite get anything, leave a comment below. And of course, the code is all underneath of the video and it's heavily commented. In the next part of the tutorial, I'm going to get a little bit more simplistic, go through array lists. Till next time.